My Hero Academia Chapter 311 is, in my opinion, one of the best recent chapters for the series. So let's get into what I think is so special about it. The chapter begins with the previous one for all users all talking in the Vestige realm. We see Banjo stating that Shigaraki's regeneration is their biggest worry at the minute. Though, as they're talking, Shinomori's danger sense suddenly activates. We see a huge Shigaraki hand invading the Vestige space after he touched Deku's face in the last chapter. Having realised what's going on, Shinomori pushes the others out the way and gets in the way to block the attack. Though in doing so, he gets pulled away, which is what led to the events on the final page of last chapter, with Danger Sense now being stolen by Shigaraki. Banjo tells this to Deku, and this is where the last chapter ends off, and we now begin with all of the new stuff. Shigaraki slaps All For One in the face again, saying that my master had a hard time trying to steal it whilst examining his hand, and then proceeding to say that he doesn't even care that he's now got it. Shinomori's chair begins disintegrating, yes, even the chair, as we see Deku utilising a Black Whip plus Fajin plus Gear Shift combination Black Chains to try and fight Shigaraki in the air now, kind of looking like a morphed Dr. Octopus. I have to say, it looks fucking cool. Shigaraki also realises that this is how he's been dodging his attacks through the use of Danger Sense. Deku realises this, but not before Shigaraki now has his eyes fully set on decaying him, stating that he's the biggest nuisance and that he's going to start by decaying Deku. He charges full force at him, and this is where I think we get some of the most masterful dialogue in the war chapters. Shigaraki mocks every single thing that Deku has said to him, saying, "You were crying, I won't pretend I didn't see you. Are you still treating me as a human being?" He shouts that Deku is stuck in the past as he throws him through multiple buildings, demanding him to open his eyes. He announces that that is not who he is anymore, so basically claiming that he is not human at this point. Deku lands and is clearly very injured, saying that by covering myself with multiple layers of Black Whip I can avoid fatal wounds, so not exactly healing but acting as a bit of a net. There's now with a crack that we hear Deku's mask breaking. He recalls back at this point to when All Might went to actually go and fetch it after his fight with Class 1A. If you don't remember, this is when All Might had his confrontation with Stain, where Stain basically reignited the spark inside of him and showed him all of the people that cared about him. The second one for all users says that the mask was actually to help with breathing, as they were previously fighting with the massive waves that had been created through Shigaraki's decay. Though he then asks Deku to look at where they are now. Deku looks around, and it is now that we see that they have actually made it all the way to Mount Fuji, which is where I believe the final confrontation of the series is going to be. Which, if you told me that the final fight of the series was going to take place on Mount Fuji, I wouldn't have believed you, but it is such a cool and unique setting to have this final bout between somebody that can literally decay anything. It also acts as another ticking clock, a la the Birdcage from Dressrosa in One Piece, or Onigashima from Wano in One Piece. With there being the constant fear that Shigaraki is going to decay the mountain, causing all of the lava to basically spew onto all of the civilians. The second user then also elaborates, saying that Shigaraki only stole the quirk itself, so that being Danger Sense, and that his physical strength remains the same. So this basically means that Deku still has a fighting chance. I reckon that the final act of this fight, Deku may or may not have only one or two quirks. I think that if he were to have any, I reckon Gear Shift and obviously his super strength. He basically then explains how this is possible, and that's because it's stored within One For All, not in their individual quirk factors. Though it's now for the first time that we see one of the One For All vestiges actually panicking in the situation that they're in. We see N, I believe the fourth user, asking why he isn't using his superhuman strength to just run away. Banjo confronts him about this, to what he says Shinomori-san was able to protect us thanks to Danger Sense, and he's got a point. Now they have no way of knowing what is going to happen. I guess this also kind of shows that they have gotten quite used to, using Danger Sense at this point. So it's quite interesting that that was the very first quirk to be taken from Deku. He then says that if the ninth gets touched again for even a second, there may be no escape for any of us, which I think is where this is going to come into play later on, as I said previously, with multiple of the quirks being taken, and Deku literally having to fight with just his super strength, so going back to the OG style of fighting. Shigaraki comes flying in and funnily enough says exactly what they were thinking, asking if they are discussing why he should run away. And bro, Deku and the first user look absolutely fucking petrified. I mean, rightfully so. The next panel we see of Shigaraki, he looks like a demon. Though Shigaraki then calls back to Spinner and the fact that this was originally Spinner's idea of it being a giant wasteland. And I love callbacks like these because Shigaraki's and Spinner's relationship has been something that's developed since, I believe, My Villain Academia. And I think that where the beginning of the war kind of fell a bit flat, it's moments like these that really contextualise the characters' feelings, the emotions, and also make them feel constant throughout the series. Shigaraki continues walking forward and we see a massive wall of decay behind him. And this is when he announces his plan that he's going to start with Mount Fuji and his decay of everything. We see a panel of him decaying everything around him and absolutely loving it. We see a smile on his face similar to that of My Villain Academia. The One for All vestiges then realise that if Mount Fuji gets decayed, this is what will lead to the lava literally flowing everywhere across the battlefield. En, shook as before, says that at this point he's not All for One's successor and that he merely lives for the joy of breaking it all and that he is destruction incarnate. Which we then see Deku facing off against this massive wall of decay. He says, whilst gripping his fist, that all of this is part of a bigger picture deep inside. We then also get a callback to Ochiko's and Deku's conversation before the final war actually started, so that weird stretch of chapters. She says that I have no clue what's obvious for her. This is obviously in reference to the Toga fight and her, voicing her concerns about how she doesn't actually know how she's going to deal with it. And it's really moments like these that make you think that these characters are slowly turning into therapists for the villains they're fighting. I mean, if you look at the Shoto fight, you look at the Uraraka fight, you look at this fight, all of them are more or less just throwing hands whilst having a quick therapy session. Deku grips his fist, activates One for All, and says to Shigaraki that he is in fact human, so basically still attempting to get his point across even after Shigaraki said everything he said earlier. Now the final page of the chapter shows Shigaraki smiling, with Danger Sense activating fully around him. With this, the chapter comes to a close, and I have to say what an amazing chapter to start the year off with. With the fact that this will likely be the last year that My Hero Academia is in serialization, Horikoshi is not holding anything back. The artwork, the characters and the storytelling have all been absolutely on point since the middle point of the war. I'd say that this chapter ranks in the S tier of all of the chapters released for the final war, giving it as close to a 10 out of 10 rating as I possibly could. But with all of that said, have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening, and I shall catch you in the next video.